Welcome to the Cherry Picker, the horror movie podcast where we like to kill people, but not really. I'm your host, Zack, and with me as always is...
You! Eddie of Edward's Truth. I'll explain that in a minute.
Okay, I need context. And today we are talking about Wrong Turn. Right. Released May 30th, 2003. This is 20 years old to the day.
Crazy.
What do you think about that?
Not much. I mean...
Well,
how about yourself?
Well, this is kind of like a big deal for me because this was the movie that I think this was like the first movie that I saw or like that came out in the theater when I graduated high school. Oh. So this is like a very sobering thought to know that I've been out of high school for 20 years now, which does not feel like it, but it's just like, holy fuck. Man, like,
okay.
This was the movie that I, finished my high school tenure on by going to see this, and
okay, well,
I really loved it. I was like, I had very favorable opinions of this movie at the time and for quite some time after that.
Okay.
I won't spoil whether I still feel that way or not, but what say you? What is your history?
Well, I had already been out of high school for about 6 years at that point. So the first movie I saw, literally the night of my graduation, a bunch of other my friends were like all having parties and shit. I just went to go see Batman and Robin.
Oh wow!
And that was upsetting. That was really upsetting. So I wish I'd seen Wrong Turn instead. Maybe, I don't know. But I remember. Okay, I saw it with a different kind of framework than I usually do, like going into horror movies, because I had a friend who worked on it, or not who worked on it, but who worked for the Stan Winston's company while that was undergoing pre-production, production, and post-production. She had a temporary position. It was not as a creative, so she didn't really like collaborate on it or anything, but she had access, so we got to go see it for free, basically.
Okay.
And she brought me and my sister along, and we were all kind of like looking forward to it, like, so let's celebrate our friend's like new position, and hopefully she'll like excel, and she didn't, but but well, we're not friends anymore, so it's okay. But
well.
But I remember,
I don't want to celebrate anyone's
no, me neither.
mobility.
I'm sure she's fine now. But I remember sitting there. We were all kind of like not excited, but optimistic. Just kind of like, oh, Stan Winston, and this thing that kind of looks like, I don't know, adjacent to Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because it's we'd seen the promotional material and knew that it was like a bunch of people and Faith. Going into the wilds, into the the frontier, and basically kind of encountering like this family that's been living the life that they've been living for quite some time, and now their periscope is on you. So then we started watching it, and I just remember after it was over, we were all three of us very disappointed. Kind of like, wow, well, thanks for getting us the tickets, was the attitude. And I didn't see it again for a while, and then I, for some reason, I don't even remember why. I think I rented it just out of curiosity. I think I wanted to see the sequels, and in order to kind of better digest them, I wanted to start with the original again, revisit it, see how I felt. Because I had seen Joe Lynch, the director of Wrong Turn 2, in a number of like panel discussions. He was on the commentary for Friday the 13th Part 4 on Blu-ray and stuff. And I liked him, so I wanted to see his movie, and I wanted to see how many of these sequels can I get through. So I revisited the first movie, and I feel like I always kind of revert back to my original response in my memory. Because I think every time I watch it, I have the same experience of, oh, it's not as bad as I remember. And then time goes by, and I haven't seen, because I don't watch it every year or anything. A few years go by, and I just kind of think, oh, wrong turn. Ugh. And then I'll rewatch it and be kind of like, even with this screening, I was like, it's not as bad as I remember. Like, there's some things I was actually kind of surprised, but I'm glad we're talking about it because I have questions for you.
I love when you have questions.
So yeah, that's where I landed this particular screening.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. Do you have a premise that you want to grace us with first before we get in?
Sure.
Yeah.
Should I just do regular voice?
Yeah. It's
all right.
It's up to you.
All right. When a medical student named Chris and a group of 5 friends all find each other stranded deep in the middle of the woods after a car collision, they face a blood-curdling fate as 3 cannibalistic inbred mountain men hunt them down one by one. Who will survive, and what will be left of them as a result of this wrong turn? Appropriation.
So wait, remind me again what movie the Who Will Survive and What Will Be Left of Them is
That's
from?
Texas Chainsaw Massacre. OG, Texas Chainsaw Massacre's tagline.
There's so many that sound exactly the same. They're just like, it could be like Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah.
Or what the Last House on the Left, or like they're all interchangeable to me.
Mm-hmm. Those Hansel and Gretel type movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wandering in the woods, happen upon something unfortunate, or not even the woods. In Hills Have Eyes, it's desert? I don't even remember. The wilds.
Yes.
Wilds.
Well, I think when I first saw this, and they even mentioned Deliverance in this movie, because I was like a huge fan of Deliverance. I don't know. Wow. That's a weird thing to be like, oh my god, Deliverance! It was so amazing. That love scene. But I think with this was a time, because I finished high school when I was 17. Like, I didn't finish early, but you know how, like, sometime, like, just depending on, like, when you start the year, when your birthday is. So I was always, like, the youngest in my class. And
me too.
So I was, like, 17. So I wasn't, like, old enough to technically see a lot of these movies that were, Canadian restricted or, whatever the rating system is here. So I'd have to sneak around and, this one I was able to see. I think. I didn't have to go with my mom, I don't think. That's like such an embarrassing thing to admit on a podcast. There's so many movies I had to go see with my mom because we weren't allowed to see. But I think I went to this one on, with friends.
Sure.
There were, my stepfather would sometimes get up in my business. He was very inconsistent about this, but sometimes he'd be like, you can't watch anything that's rated 18A or over, and then other times he just didn't care. But then there were certain movies that he would deem like had historical relevance or were important, and therefore it was okay if I saw it. And I think we were watching, like, Deliverance came on TV, and I didn't get to see the whole movie. Like, I think, like, I just came at the tail end. I'm just like, oh, this looks like, because it was well past the scene. But I'm like, oh, this looks like it's really intense. Like, this is something I want to see. So I went to the store, like, within a few weeks of seeing it, and I saw it, the DVD, and I purchased it. And it was, like, above my rating for, like, my age, but most of the stores in Canada didn't, like, ask for ID or I don't even think they thought anything of it. They're just making a sale. So I just, like, that was one of the few movies that I was able to watch that I wasn't like being like parented on or things like that.
Sure.
And I just like I think I grew an attachment to it through that. And also just like the whole like dueling banjos thing. But then when Wrong Turn came out, I'm just like, oh, it's like Deliverance, but like Scream, you know, like from the Scream era. So I was just like, okay, cool, yeah, I want to see this, and it's got Eliza Dushku in it,
Yes.
Faith
Yes.
from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So I'm just like, yeah, absolutely, I'm going to see this fucking movie.
Sure.
And I loved it, and as far as the sequels go, because there's seven altogether, 7 movies altogether now, right?
Sure.
Something
like that, yeah.
I have not seen the last 2, but I think it just got to a point where it's just like, ugh, I'm so bereft by this like low quality, like and they're bad. They're awful, and it's just like it's almost like the material that they're pumping out does not justify this as being a franchise. So yeah, I just kind of like fell off of it, and watching it this most recent time yesterday, I was like in and out. There were certain parts that I really love. Like it's kind of it's a slow build up at the beginning, but once it kind of gets going, there's like some really intense set pieces.
Sure.
Leading right up to like when they're in the trees, and you know there's that whole bit, and I'm like, oh wow, this is really good. Like I remember why I love this so much, and then the movie may as well have just ended there, because the last act, if you even want to call it like an act, because it's like it's so rushed, was so unremarkable and unmemorable that it's just like, way to end. Like what, like they could have set something up, because it just felt like such a pedestrian ending of just like, let's just go through the motions and like get this over with. That it kind of it didn't ruin the whole movie for me, but it was a letdown, and I was just like, this is not as good as I remember it. And even watching it, I mean, I think that the production values of this first one are much better than the sequels, but even watching the movie, I'm just like, yeah, this does feel like I would watch those straight to video sequels, and I'd be like, how did they go so wrong? Like how did it get so bad? And now I look at it and I'm like, it's not really that far off from what the original was. But long story short, I rated this, or reviewed it on Letterboxd. I put a blurb in there, but I gave it 3.5 stars, and then the next day I'm just like, no, I'm gonna put it down to 3. So that's where I say with this movie. I think it's very effective for being like as simplistic as it is, but it's just, as far as I'm concerned, another like throwaway 2000s movie at this point. And well, I'll let you kind of have a turn here before I go on to my next point.
Okay.
You're welcome.
In terms of like reacting to, thank you. In terms of reacting to what you've said, in terms of the sequels, there is one that I actually prefer to this movie.
Oh yeah.
Which, if we ever decide to sail through this franchise, you'll find out which movie that is. But and it won't take long. Let's just put it that way. Because ultimately, I do feel like as a franchise, I agree with you. I think that the bulk of these movies, in and of themselves, are lackluster and not even interesting enough to be exploitative. Like. Somebody could make an argument to me that like a movie like Silent Night, Deadly Night is exploitative, and I would say, yes, absolutely, I agree with you that it is, but I still enjoy the ride. I still will watch it every year around Christmas time because I need to court that kind of darkness in my own. I need to allow that kind of darkness to coexist with all the holiday cheer. Right. But with this one, Even with this first one, I'll ask you a big question now. Maybe you've already answered it, but I found myself, again, kind of like checking the boxes of like the positive points as we were moving through it, and we'll go over those. But ultimately, it felt like there was one crucial component missing, and I don't know what it is. And even as I was watching a lot of promotional material, like rewatching it, like old like interviews, they really promoted the Stan Winston like first and foremost.
Yeah. And this
with
was
the
his
promotional
second
material.
last movie.
Oh,
right?
God. Sure. I don't remember. I try not to hold on to stuff like that. I remember.
Okay, wait. So, not to get off on a tangent, but like, so you remember that? Like, you're just trying to get to the bottom of what that missing ingredient is.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm watching all these interviews with the team that's working on it, and everybody seems really invested in, and not like in that stupid, we got to promote a movie, so we got to act like it's the scariest thing ever kind of way. Even though they are certainly doing that, but at the same time, there seems to be actual, like so much effort and so much attention to details. And maybe I'll start to answer my own question, but like to details that it was wonderful to learn about in the promotional material that are not evident on screen for me. And maybe that's a big part of it. They discussed the family and about like where they came from and about the research and about the design of each one of them and even their physical movement. They described, I forget, anyone that's not three finger.
Yeah, three finger, sawtooth, and one eye.
Right. And I can never, Three Finger's the only one that ever stands out to me because he's also, spoiler, he's the only one that turns up in every movie somehow, even when he's executed. But
well, Three Finger is also played by an actor who you're probably familiar with, and I think a lot of people are, just in terms of the genre. Julian Richings, I believe is his name. And just as a you would know him to see him because he has a very distinct face, almost like he looks like a bird almost. But he like was the
bird Muppet.
Yeah, he was the janitor. We haven't covered this movie yet, but he's the janitor in Urban Legend.
Right.
So, and this was filmed in Canada, so he's a Canadian actor, and I met him once in like the strangest. I mean, I didn't meet him, like I didn't have like a personal conversation with him, but I had moved back to Toronto about 10 years ago now, and I was staying temporarily with my parents, who had also just moved back there, and my stepfather, he had like a poker group of just like his friends, and Julian Richings, the guy who plays Three Finger, was in this group. Like, it was like a friend of like one of my stepdad's friends, and I come home and there like all these strangers are just like sitting in the kitchen playing poker, and I like look at this guy and I'm just like, oh my god, I know him, but I didn't want to be like, are you that? Because that's just embarrassing to like ask someone if they're this person and then like be incorrect. So instead I like excuse myself because I'm just like, I can't be here right now. And I went downstairs because I had like all my movies were in the boxes because I had just moved. I still wasn't settled into like where I was going to move. So I was like going through my like this box of DVDs and just pulling out all these movies that he was in. Because I like even like IMDb'd it. I'm like, oh, that's absolutely him. I know it's him. So I was like pulling out Wrong Turn and Cube and Urban Legend. And there's even more. And I'm just like, oh my God. I was like starstruck in a way, but I couldn't like go up there and like talk to him because I was just too like shy. But then after the fact, I was like, they left, and I said to my stepdad, I'm just like, is that one guy? I think he actually brought it up. He's just like, oh yeah, he's an actor, and I'm like, yeah, like I have all these. I was just like, here's all his movies, and he's like, oh my God, that's so neat. So he was in my vicinity, but I didn't actually talk to him. But he's in everything under the sun that we would know. I'll look up some more titles if you want to continue talking about the characters.
Well, this is the thing. He's also the most memorable of them. This was the thing that kind of made me sad because even after just rewatching it last night, and I was watching the promotional materials today, they were talking about these descriptive kind of like characteristics they wanted to attribute to each member of this family. And the only one that I felt was manifest on screen was for Three Finger, because they talked about his manic quality, the fact that he is just completely like he's a wild card. He's just chaos. He never stops moving, and you will always feel unsettled around him.
He's the scariest one.
He is, and also the one that the most memorable because of that laugh, that laugh. They were smart to end the movie, in the end credits with that laugh, because that's one of the things that is most memorable about this entire franchise. But so I can understand why, in a way, they Brended him, like Scary Movie Brenda. But just keep bringing him back. But but with Sawtooth and One Eye, I can't remember which. I think One Eye was supposed to be like the more laborious movement, like the one who was kind of like a rogue elephant and just didn't, really, really move quickly. And then Sawtooth was supposed to be, unless I'm incorrect, was supposed to be kind of like the more childlike one. The one that was like a child living inside of a large man's body. So therefore there's freedom, but there's also timidity. Like there's, all these things that I guess we would ascribe to a young child that's out of touch, that's seeing the world for the first time all the time, maybe. Yeah. So I'm guessing Well, but if that's the thing. They talked about all this stuff, and I'm like, well, I wish there would have been more moments for me to kind of like discern who I'm looking at. Like I know when it's Three Finger, but we rarely get kind of like close-ups that, and even their names with like the One Eye and the Sawtooth, they never. It's not like they should say them. I doubt that they're going to have like labels like on their clothes or name tags that are going to say, hello, my name is Sawtooth or One Eye or anything like that. But I couldn't tell oftentimes who I was looking at if it wasn't, this high, giggly, chaotic being. Well, it was hard, to discern.
Yeah, I think because and this is not a knock at the actors who played the other two.
No,
but there was nothing distinguishing about their performances. They were just sort of they showed up and they did their jobs. That was great. But what like Julian does with Three Finger is like memorable. Like he takes it to a level of camp. That's why, because he didn't actually come back for any of the sequels. They just recast the part,
right? The character,
unfortunately. But it's like you described it perfectly. Like he has that manic energy. I would actually consider him to be the child of the threesome there. But you're right. Like all the other two, like it's just like extreme close-ups on them. We don't really get a sense of like their full presence.
No.
So, and there's an interesting bit because the opening credits sort of have these newspaper clippings, and it's almost like a backstory that they've painted. And I mean, you may as well just tell me what sequel it is that you're talking about. I don't think it's going to be this one, but I remember in the fourth one, that's where they kind of they it's like a snow setting, and they go back to the asylum where they
were tortured into their whatever.
I don't remember anything. But
there was like a sadistic doctor who basically.
I was gonna say I don't even.
Sorry.
I don't even need
but
to know.
It was terrible. It was horribly conceived and horribly executed, and it was just a slog to get through. It's not the fourth one, but.
Well, no, I remember the fourth one though. There is has the asylum. Anyway, I'm not going to argue.
No, it does. No. I'm agreeing with you in terms of like what you're describing. My favorite is not the fourth.
Oh, okay. No, fair enough. But it just made me think. I'm like, oh, did they like pre-plan this that it would go in a franchise, which I doubt, or it's just like more so that the fourth movie was like, oh, let's take like these newspaper clippings from the beginning and make a whole backstory out of it.
The latter one.
And it's kind of, it goes back to like the Billy Loomis, Stu Macher of it all. It's just like, it's scarier when there's no motive. It's scarier when you don't know about the creatures. And I think that I would say that my takeaway of just like what the missing ingredient in this movie was, because I don't necessarily think that it needed to be more of an idea of like who they were, where they came from, because like again, we don't need to know that, but I just feel like the movie never like fully committed to any of its ideas. It didn't fully commit to its characters. It didn't fully commit to the monsters, just in the way that how we said like the other two were kind of there. And even with Three Finger, like he does get the most exposure, but we don't really, we don't, the time we spend with them is just like, it's so rapid, like quick cut shots of just like more so like their menacing presence looming than actually seeing that. Like it's, different than hanging out behind Michael Myers as he gets out of the car and watches Annie, walk up to the Wallace house. We don't get that with the cannibals here. It's more so just they're walking around, sniffing things. They're carrying their torches and just like looking, like tracking. And it doesn't work the same way, but I feel like once they're aware of like your presence, then that's when like the tension escalates. Or when you're trying to like not be noticed by them, then that's when it works. But just in terms of just seeing them kind of like wander through the woods, like none of that was interesting. None of that was scary or compelling. And the characters, again, that they were trying to have a semblance of like some sort of depth to each one of them. I would actually say that the other couple, or like the actual couple, were the more like interesting and entertaining. But then once he left, she became a fucking nightmare. Like
Carly and Scott, Jeremy Sisto and Emmanuel Shriekwe, I guess is how you say it.
Shriek Queen.
Shriekwe. It's like Chriqui. Don't tell me. Emmanuel, that's the actress's name. But she played Carly, and Jeremy Sisto, everybody knows from Clueless and 6 Feet Under, and I've seen him in a number of plays out here on the West Coast. So he was great. Very accomplished actor. Yeah. He really was. I wish. I feel like they, again, like I can see where the ideas were in terms of like number one, being lucky enough to cast him. But also in terms of like his kind of earlier, it's not that early, but it's kind of like at the midpoint, like elimination, like his being extricated from the group. He was and stuff.
Kind of giving me like Jeff Goldblum energy, and I'm just thinking like he's not the lead. He's the it's just Jurassic Park. It's he's just like the fun supporting character because like, and I was actually even thinking like Eliza Dushku. In this movie, she has like those elements of faith.
Yes.
Yeah. And we've talked about this because we watched Soul Survivors on the old podcast a long time ago, and it was just like she's like faith light, or she's giving the faith, but she's not.
We kept waiting for faith to come through to show up and be
and like she has the sassiness, like she has that quality. She's just like she's like the rough and tumble. She's like one of the tomboys. Like there's one point where they're like looking over the edge where there's like the dead end sign, and she puts her leg up on the thing like I'm a tough chick. But I'm just like I just found her, and this is not her performance, but it's just like the character was so flat, and the main guy, Desmond
Chris
Harrington, like could there not have been like a more like uncharismatic
there was originally the line that I wanted to say at the top was I need to be in Raleigh by 7, delivered as flatly as I just did, because I think he says it 2 or 3 times in the movie, and every time there's never any urgency behind it. There's never
I mean even at that point when he's still saying it, just like, dude, you just got into a car crash.
Yeah.
You're not going to Raleigh.
No, you're not making it.
But by the time you get to civilization, you got to go deal with that shit. Like, forget it. It's off the table. I think it's just like, it was more so he had that mentality. It's just like, I'm a medical student. I need everyone to know. Or just like, at least we need this, the audience needs to know. And all it really comes into play is when he kind of like, wraps up his own gunshot wound later on. and
Right, exactly. That, at least it came in handy. But I mean, we all knew once it was established that he was a medical student, there was going to be a certain point where he was going to need to attend to someone's wound, maybe his own, maybe somebody else's, who knows, but to a wound, and that was going to keep whoever it was going a little bit longer into the movie. And that, so that kind of thing is really familiar. I wish the filmmakers had enough foresight to know once again, I don't know the logistics of this, because sometimes the screenwriting is going on like the whole time you're shooting, and you can change things and rewrite and hand the actors new pages, and you by the movie there's the movie you've signed on to, and then the movie you've shot, and then the movie you've edited, 3 completely different animals. But I really wish once they realized they had Jeremy Sisto playing that role and that he was as endearing as he was, that they would have realized, you know what? We've got this like quote unquote kind of token leading man type with Desmond Harrington.
Yeah.
But he's not going to be the one the audiences glom onto in terms of their experience. Yeah. Because I can see why they cast him and why they decided that he would be the character who's going to kind of like last as long as he does, and all the way to the end and everything like that, along with Eliza Dushku.
Because he's hot.
And he's got, again, like kind of like an action, kind of an action-y movie like thing. Like he's got like a quiet reserve, he's got a steely glance, he seems to have like a cool head, and
he was also
like high stress
in
situations.
He was in Ghost Ship. Do you remember
right
that?
Yeah. I remember that.
Well, mostly what I think he's maybe most well known for is he was on Dexter. He played Detective Quinn.
Sure.
I think was the one who is hooks up with Deborah, Dexter's sister.
Sure.
But he went through like a physical transformation, because he, like, by the time that series like ended, like he was very gaunt, shall we say.
Oh wow.
But like he looks very different
sure.
from now. He was in like Gossip Girl as well. But those are like the things I remember him most from. And this is, I think this was the first time I had seen him. And I because I didn't catch Ghost Ship when that first came out.
Sure, but the point is, I wish that they would have recognized, like, it would be a lot more interesting to see how the neurotic guy deals with being among the last one standing, than as opposed to like, what if the guy who you think is going to make it all the way through gets taken out, and this guy, because the whole point, I saw the director talking to it, saying like, I really loved introducing this sympathetic character and then letting him, I wanted one of the deaths to be a sacrifice, and the fact that it was him, and I'm like, but it was a sacrifice in its intent originally. Like he didn't know if he was going to make it or not, but the plain fact of the matter is Jeremy Sisto's character Scott did not sacrifice himself so much as by the time his girlfriend saw him, his panicking like useless girlfriend is like sitting there in the car going, there he is, Scott, come run to the car. It's not like you have people chasing you, hunting you, waiting to like find out where you are, and like my voice is giving that away. Come on, Scott, run. And then he gets 3 fucking arrows in the back. I mean, that's an accidental death, and that's all her fault.
What?
I'm sorry.
I mean, I don't know if that was her fault specifically. She's guilty of a lot of shit later on, but I think that they had been following him. They knew where he was. They had her, like, he's wearing a bright yellow shirt. They've got their arrows trained on him. But what I was going to say is that maybe what would have worked is to have Desmond Harrington, Chris, be kind of like the Friday the 13th Annie of this situation, because it's almost the same thing. It's just like, I gotta get to Camp Crystal Lake. I gotta be there in a half an hour. Only for us to think like this is her movie. She's the lead. And then they could have killed him off before he got to the other group, or they could have killed him off Jenna style, I think is the character's name in Friday the 13th, 2009, where it's just like, oh, you thought she was the final girl, psych. But I think that would have been a lot more effective than the opening that they did go with just the two random climbers, because it's just like, if they knew that they had something with Jeremy Sisto as a character, it's just like, why bother with all of these other like nobodies? Not the actors, but
but they need a body count, and it's very clear, and I saw it in the promotional material when they were describing Francine, the first of the group to be plucked out.
Second.
She's the second of the group?
Yeah. The first one is Evan.
Oh, okay. See, I can't even remember the order. Anyway, the way they were pushing it was that. Well, because the reason they were pushing maybe the promotional material confused me, because in an interview the director is sitting there talking about how, and she's the promiscuous girl, so obviously she has to be the first to go. So that's what I carried away with me, just going like, shut up. But see, things like that. Even I remember like in 2003 sitting in the theater watching it, going like, oh no, because she's the girl who likes sex and has sex, is she gonna have to die? Of course she is.
Because they literally stay behind and smoke weed, while the others like take off. So
they're breaking the rules. So,
yeah, it's just like if you're a medical student, like that's how you survive a horror movie.
But see, the thing is, like that's another thing. It's like it seems to be straddling like being this kind of like accessible fear realism that I would argue the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre tapped into, in terms of like, well, what if you were there? What if you were out there in broad daylight and there were people hunting you, and and there was no one for miles to like help you, and you knew that there were like there was like a laundry list of names of people who came before you, so how are you going to get out of it? Like, that's terrifying. But there's also this kind of like predictable slasher formula that they seem to be writing as well, that maybe that's another reason it doesn't work for me. It's like, well, make up your mind. Are you like a traditional slasher where you're going to just play the same old tropes over again? Or are you actually trying to make something that's accessible and that's dimensional and surprise us? And I don't feel like it really succeeded in either direction, because it never really commits in either direction.
Well, I think that we worked through it, and we got the answer as to why, at least for you and I, because there could be a lot of listeners and viewers who do love this movie and still love it, but I mean just in terms of like the slasher predictability and all that, because I mean this is not a slasher movie, but it's still kind of running on those Scream fumes, and I think that at this point, 69 episodes into this podcast, we've come to the understanding that Scream did not succeed because it was the first of its kind. It succeeded because it was the only one of its kind. And the movies that tried to emulate that success lost sight of the bigger picture of, what they were doing. I mean, some did it a lot more successfully, but that's why we got to 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, where it just didn't work anymore, and and that's why we see it. And it's not that it didn't work. That's not to say that Scream didn't work. It's just that the kind of the repetition or the copycat, or just like the misconception of what Scream was, didn't work anymore, because Scream works because it is so intently focused on its characters and these backstories. And I mean, it doesn't hurt that it had Wes Craven at the helm too, even though I don't want to say that this director, I think, did a competent job for what he was working with here. But it's, you can only go so far with like that simplicity and like the basicness of it all. And that's why I think that, I mean, maybe that's why I liked it at the time, because it did kind of like, it had the appearance of one of those movies. I mean, not that the poster wasn't like the Scream, like all the people standing there. I think that they were moving away
it was
from
just Eliza Dushku, right?
Yeah, and like the face of like one of the cannibals and trees and all that. But I mean, just the fact that it is Eliza, and it's just like, here's a well-known face as like part of like the current, pop culture, you know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So I mean, like,
crop
you know,
of young actors.
Yeah, we'll go see movies like this, and I'm like, yes, like this is great. I loved it, and it is very much in a way. And even the director said this. It was like, you know, his kind of version of Texas Chainsaw Massacre for the 2003, and I think this must have come out before. And in fact, I know it came out just right before Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003 came out. So I mean, maybe if TCM 03 didn't come out, I mean, I don't know what the trajectory would have been for this franchise, but I'll have to watch that one again and just like compare the two and just see like which one do I like better.
See, that's the one that I saw that same year, and I was kind of bowled over by it initially, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003, and I've already brought up the original. Obviously, I'm a fan, but if you haven't seen us discussing the franchise, check that pod out. It's entertaining. But
episode 3.
We're very ambitious with that episode, but with this
basically all the first movie, and then let's get through the rest.
And then just okay, Eddie, what do you have to say?
We should have just done the first movie, but I think we were trying to get all of them talked about before the
You didn't want to do the sequels. But anyway, maybe we will one day. I you know me, I have tons to say about all those sequels,
you do.
So
yeah.
You know I do. Yeah. That's why it was as long as it was. But anyway, but with this one, I actually did. It occurred to me I had to look it up because I knew this was released in 2003 and I knew TCM, the remake, was made in 2003. And I wondered which one came out first, who copied who? Because even with like kind of like the allusions to like the long held history, the legend of like this family and like the inbreeding and all of that, and then that juxtaposed with TCM opening with just kind of like the John Larroquette voiceover and all of this stuff about like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then like all the footage of Leatherface and all that, like all of it seeming like, you know, like you're treading on like hallowed ground almost, like that to kind of like evoke that feeling that you get when someone takes you to a place, a potentially spooky place, and then like, you know, there's a story about what happened here, and then they tell you the spooky story, and it's so much scarier because you're already kind of immersed in the environment of it. And so I wondered who cribbed off who, and it's perfectly legitimate to argue nobody cribbed off anybody because it's not really copying, but this movie did do it first. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they would have still been in production at the same-ish time, because I think TCM came out in August or something.
In October.
Oh, October.
I looked it up. Yeah.
And that movie probably took a lot longer to film as well, because that was a bigger budget and a little bit more ambitious.
But it was so shocking to me because you also brought up Jurassic Park a little while ago, talking about the Jeff Goldblum of it all. Another thing that kind of evoked, also the Stan Winston of it all, because he did the creature effects for Jurassic Park also. I felt like as I was watching Wrong Turn, it felt so much more of the Jurassic Park era and what followed that, as opposed to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake era and what followed after that. Like, it seemed, even just visually, I was like, oh my god, the colors are so much more vivid. I remember it being much more rugged, and not necessarily in that gritty, grody reboot style, but in that, you know, that we always allude to, but much more just kind of like grimy browns and everything. But I'm like, look how blue the sky is. Look how some of the characters that get killed off earlier are wearing pastels and bright colors and things like I can see color. I can see the green in the trees and everything like that. The fire is very orange and everything like that. And I was like, I don't remember it feeling, I don't know if lush is the right word, but saturated. Maybe that's the word.
2003 really was like a turning point. Because I'd say that Texas Chainsaw is really the first remake, because I mean, we've talked about this. You know how I don't include House on Haunted Hill and 13 Ghosts as part of like the remake-assance,
yes,
as it were.
Good.
But I mean, I like those movies. As remakes, I like those movies so much more than, you know, most of what followed. I mean, there are some remakes that I make exceptions for, but if I were to watch Texas Chainsaw 03 like right now, having just watched Wrong Turn, I don't know which one I would prefer over the other, because I actually think that each one has strengths in different areas, and I think what you just brought up about just sort of like the Jurassic Park adventure of it all, I think that that's really strong with Wrong Turn, and I enjoy that, and I think that that's kind of like by the end of it, that's where it kind of ran out of steam, and that's why like the last 15 really minutes of the movie, because it's a short movie, or it might even be 10, but just kind of fall extremely flat, because it's just sort of like, okay, now she's been for some reason kidnapped and not harmed at all. So, you know, we got to go back and rescue her. Whereas like in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I know there's a lot of running around. There's a lot of running, and it's just like we're running from scene to scene to scene. But I remember, not wholly or vividly, I remember the end of the movie, at least with her at the meat packing, like warehouse, because that's like that's a setting for a finale. It's just like, oh, we're getting to like the final boss stage here. There's like the pigs like hiding out in like, you know, even though why are there pigs there if it's been closed down? But whatever, I digress. Different movie. But it's still like it ends. It just like it finishes off on like a note at the very least. So I think that there are elements of both of these movies that almost like if combined together, like, you know, could have been the best version in my eyes, and perhaps yours too, because we seem to be on the same page about this, of just like what like the best like sort of like cannibalistic like backwoods horror survival movie would have been at that time, because a lot of people do really love Texas Chainsaw Massacre 03 as well.
Of course. And I mean, I have my own mixed reaction to that movie as well. But one thing that I was kind of like, after a while watching this one, I started to realize, I think what made me lean more into the production, and some people would argue the overproduction of the Texas Chainsaw remake in 03, is... It was a strength for me. It was Marcus Nispel's kind of music video eye, like the way he had like shafts of light coming through. I mean, like, and arguably both of these movies, Wrong Turn and the Texas Chainsaw remake, have this incredible bright night that they kind of inflict, this unnatural like floodlight reality that they try to convince us is nighttime. And there's, you know, it's, and there's, even if they just like going to cut, I don't know, did they ever cut to a full moon in Wrong Turn? I don't feel like there's ever kind of like an explanation for the source of like how well lit they are. But that's back to Jurassic Park for me also. Like that's one of the most well lit islands at night I have ever seen in my life. So that was another thing that evoked that kind of feeling.
And I want to say that you mentioned this, like, just I don't even think they did cut to the moon, but there really is a lack of any sort of atmosphere in this movie. It just feels like we're in the woods. That's our atmosphere, but there's nothing to like kind of like tonally set it to be like a scary environment. Like the only thing, at least like I feel like they did an effective job just like translating what was probably on the script into the movie, but it's just in that regard they were only concerned about making the cannibals sort of like the presence of any sort of tone, while it's like everything else around them. It's just like I would think that in a setting like this, or a movie where the environment is such a key factor, that you'd want to at least play with that and make it scary. And some of these, like, I mean, like, they were obviously sets, or like a lot of CGI as well. That it didn't even, like, the trees, I'm sure all that was like filmed on a soundstage. Obviously,
it looked like E.T. It looked like E.T. Yeah.
These big branches that they're just kind of like flowing around.
I know. I know. I mean, even just like little things like sound editing and mixing, like just kind of like give me, and maybe they did, and it just wasn't, again, pushed forward enough, kind of like the details of the family, but like just like give me when they're like crossing the branches to like try and walk, give me some real creaking of the wood. Like let me know how tenuous, you know, this particular branch that they're dependent on. It's not just a piece of a set like a plank that you can walk across. It is any given branch on any given tree, why did it have to be this one kind of thing? Like, put me in the immediacy.
And
of
I
the
think
moment,
that's kind of like where like a director like Wes Craven would hone in on that and use that. And we would see things like to get the idea of the height, we would see like they would drop something and then we would see it fall to the to the ground. Whereas here, they're really kind of like this is a time where we're moving into like the CGI era of things. So they're doing like a lot of those like cinematic, like going through branches, like the camera's just sort of like soaring down, and it doesn't have the same effect as when you, like you said, of just like, let's like focus on like the instability of the branch or something falling and like how the distance of how far it has to go. And I mean, it felt so, I mean, when they're jumping onto those trees, Jessie is the character's name, played by Eliza Dushku. Like the first two go and they kind of like, they dive down like belly first. She does this almost like jumped and turned to the side, and it's just like, what are you doing? How are you expected to like grab onto anything when you're gonna put your body into like a spin as your fall? I don't know what that choice was, but it worked for her, so like whatever.
Also, hearing you talk about like things falling through trees, my mind immediately goes to like Jamie Lee in the opening section of like Halloween Resurrection.
Oh God.
That is so much fun to recall. And even that, like this movie, Wrong Turn, is not ridiculous enough for me to laugh at a moment that is so over the top and so poorly executed that I can have a good time with that, Yeah. But I mean, one thing that I did want to address, because I think this might have been the first thing that kind of introduced the notion of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre of it all, the remake in particular, was you brought up the introduction of Richie and whatever her name is. I don't remember the girl's name. I just remember her going, Richie! Hallie.
That's what it says on the credits.
Cool.
Yeah.
So poor Hallie with the dickiest boyfriend he's like, we're 50 miles from anybody. Who are you screaming for? She's like, you! That's where my you came from. Because I'm like, fuck you, fucker. Okay, so this movie's going to be about, I felt like I got a signal that I had forgotten about. I forgot the movie opened this way, but I was just like, okay, so I'm getting a signal that we're going to be watching douchey characters behaving in douchey ways just for the sake of being a douche. Great. Got it. Okay, I'm going to move forward. And then I didn't get that as the movie progressed. But one thing that I did appreciate, I want to cover, the score from Ilya Smirol. That was the first time I got kind of like a note in a positive way of like Texas Chainsaw 2003, because Steve Jablonsky did the score for that. But it was just like these wonderful kind of like low moans that I don't know if they were low moans. I couldn't even tell if they were from horns or from strings or anything, but just like this that just kind of spoke to this vast emptiness and hopelessness. And then he could pick it up. He could pick it up in moments, and I'm talking about Ilya, the composer for this. He could pick it up in the more actiony moments, like the more kinetic moments, and get me in the experience. His music really helped me feel if there were any high octane moments, he could get me behind it. And even just like the passage of time, there were a lot of transitional moments where people are kind of like just moving from one side of the screen to the other or whatever. And he's just kind of like got, again, like these musical choices that indicate the fact that like there is this endlessness to it all, even if it's only hours that are passing by, they might feel like days because of the predicament you're in. I really appreciated that.
I'm glad you brought up the score, because I did notice it, but I also noticed how little I was noticing it, and that is not a bad thing. And I think like that might be considered a bad thing. It's just like, well, the score was so like mediocre. They're just like, we didn't even like, we couldn't even tell that it was there. And it's just like, sometimes like you have your John Carpenter Halloween scores where just like that is the movie. But then you have the scores like this that are just like, it knows its place, and it's putting the movie in front of it. And maybe this would have been a case where the movie could have benefited from like a more like elaborate, like in your face bombastic score to like, you know, make things more memorable, because, you know, the or maybe not, because like if you know, it had to bolster the movie by aiding it and sort of like not pulling focus, I could see that. Sorry, I retract that argument. But it is a very understated score, and I agree that I think that it worked very well for what it is.
Yeah, and I was shocked because I found out that he also scored a movie that I haven't seen in years that I actually would really love to revisit, because I don't remember particularly loving the movie, but I loved the concept and certain aspects of it. Wes Craven's They. Do you remember that movie?
Never saw it, and I know we've talked about it because Wes Craven is actually not affiliated with it in any way
not
whatsoever.
At all. They never explained. I remember I combed the internet at the time. Maybe I should look again. And I even combed like the credits to try and find out, why is it Wes Craven's They? Did he write it? Did he produce it? Because he didn't direct it, or was it an original concept by him? And that was why it was kind of like poorly executed in a lot of crucial points. But I still liked it. I owned it on DVD for a long time and watched it often. And so I was really happy to find out that this composer did
Maybe
that.
it was just one of those like situations where they were paying for his name,
maybe
in a way. Because I mean, didn't you say that like someone asked him about it and he's just like, I have no idea what that movie is?
I don't remember. I don't even remember that.
Well, he's clearly like, I mean, like he's must be getting a paycheck for it. Otherwise, like, what, you know, they couldn't put
his name is
on
on it. But I wondered if maybe it was like M. Night Shyamalan's Devil, which he didn't direct, but it was like a story that his grandmother told him. Maybe Wes Craven wrote a short story called They. I have no idea. I got to do more research. But he also did Piranha 3 Double D, the score. He composed the music for Battlefield Earth, a camp classic. And Pulse
the
1
John
and 2.
Travolta.
The John Travolta, yes, Space Odyssey. So yeah, so he's got his hand in quite a few memorable projects.
Good for him. Yeah. Way to go, Elio.
I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't know if it's Elia or Elia. Smiral is how it's pronounced, but it's spelled in a really weird way. It's Cmiral. He even has the pronunciation in his IMDb credit, like, you know, this is how you say my name, kind of thing. Just because he's probably asked all the time. So, Camiro? But anyway, also, okay, I had a question. I don't know if this occurred to you while you were watching the movie. I wonder how, if any people who were raised in the backwoods of middle America or anywhere see this movie, how they might feel about the representation and everything. Even it first occurred to me, even just with the gas station, like that was another thing. I was just kind of like, oh, okay, another kind of TCM throwback. There's no wonder that I keep associating it with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like thus far. But then I saw that gas station attendant, and he felt like such a caricature. And maybe that was the intent, but are we trying to create a dimensional world, or are we trying to, you know, just create like cartoon cutouts of characters? What are we doing? Commit one way or the other. Did any of that affect you in any particular way when they stopped at the gross, you know, obviously rundown gas station with the map that is retrieved for laughs at the end of the movie?
The end?
Yeah.
No. I mean, like I said, with the ending of the movie, it just felt like the whole thing was on borrowed time, which is insane. Like, this is a very like fast-paced movie too. Like, I'll give it that. But that, like, everything that happens at the end there, I just like, this is so stupid. Even like the, like, sort of like, I guess his like big like Kurt Russell like, yeah, fuck you too moment is like, I forget what he says, but it's just like, it's almost like the movie like goes into slow motion a bit, like the camera frames like slow down, and he's got the shotgun, and he's just like, just die, or, you know, something, and then it's like, we know that he's gonna shoot the fucking gas canisters because we can see them, and then there's like the crazy fucking like fake explosion and all that. And it's almost just like, it goes back to the predictability of it. It's just like, well, these movies did this, so we have to do that too. And it's like, well, how do we end it? Well, they're going to drive away, and he's going to take the map down so no one ever goes there, or, whatever the fucking situation is. But
Or so they know how to get their way out. Like, if they have a map, then at least they have a chance in hell of navigating out
I think
the woods.
At that point, because he knew where the gas station was, I think he was just tearing it down so nobody would ever go back there or something.
Take that route.
I mean, I guess it could be looked at in different ways, because it's just like, don't you want to, like, you're going to go to the authorities and tell them that all your friends were murdered. Like, they're going to want to know how to, like, where to go and how to get there. And
isn't there some massive forest fire going on now as a result of you blowing up the shark, as it were, or, the family in their domicile, and all of those cars with all of those gas tanks? Like, wouldn't there be a huge fire going on? Yeah. Like, I almost wanted there to be like a shot flying over them. Like, we always use it to establish cars driving into places because Kubrick. Yeah. But what if we established them driving away, and as we pulled, instead of following them, what if we pulled away and pulled back to reveal black smoke, like from a giant fire?
Or almost like the way that House of Wax ended, because they did they did what you're saying in that movie. Because that's what they even say. Like, we wouldn't have even known, like, this town is not on the map. We just came to you because we saw the fire, or like the smoke from the building that had gone up in flames. Yeah. So that was actually that was my takeaway thought from the movie. Well, one of them was that, wow, like, House of Wax 2005 is really like severely underrated, because there was a lot of points in the movie, because this is just separated by 2 years, that I'm thinking about House of Wax, because I did watch it very recently, and we will cover it on the pod at one point, so I won't go too much into it. Sure. But there's so much going on in that movie, just with the characters themselves, and even like the villains, because we get like sprinklings of their backstory, but it's not like, it doesn't go into it in a way where it just like kind of takes the whole film off course. It's just a really fun movie, like from start to finish. Whereas this was just more so. This feels like it's so just like business. There's kind of like a cold, austere quality to it, of just sort of like almost like clinical. In a way of just like, we've got to check off all the boxes, like you said earlier, and just make sure that we do everything as we've been told how we should make a movie like this in the past. Mm-hmm. And then I look at a movie like House of Wax, and it's just like, we're gonna make this movie, and we're gonna have a good fucking time with it.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is now
and
2
we're gonna make
podcasts.
Sure the audience does too.
Exactly. Yeah. But this is now 2 podcasts in a row where I've brought up House of Wax. Oddly enough, but it's true. Like, it's like, that movie, I think, delivered on all the things that we're missing here, that we had mentioned earlier. But I think that my other takeaway, or what I know my other takeaway was, because I really did love this movie for the longest time, and I, like, up until yesterday, I probably, if someone asked me, I would have said, oh yeah, like, Wrong Turn's really great. I haven't seen it in a while, so don't quote me on that. But I mean, like, I've always loved it, and I think that that's a really good example of nostalgia clouding judgment, or like critical judgment. Because one thing that I see all the time as a YouTuber, just in terms of like people commenting on my shit and stuff, and especially with Scream, and I've seen this a lot for like my most recent ranking of the Scream franchise, of people just saying like, wow, you're really biased towards the first 2 movies, or like Scream 2 in particular. I think that you're letting nostalgia cloud your judgment. And I thought, you know what? Like, never fucking say that to somebody. That's so rude, because you're basically undermining that person's opinion and perception of film criticism by saying that they're not capable of having a clear critical thought of something. Because I look at Scream 2 and Scream 1 as well, and even say Scream 3. I look at those movies and I watch them, and I've even like appreciated Scream 3 more and more every time I watch it, because those movies are great. Like again, Wes Craven, like everything that he did with those movies were great, that I can go back and find new things every time, and they're so effectively done. There's the character work, the suspense is all grade A filmmaking. But then I have movies like this, or movies like, two examples that are, things that I've, had a lot of nostalgia for at the time were Bride of Chucky and Halloween H2O. And I watch them nowadays and I'm just like, I still enjoy this, but I can see the flaws. I notice the flaws and I recognize that, and I know that that's nostalgia, or just like that's nostalgia slipping away from me. And I can see these movies for, being good, but not up to par with, certain things that I know are excellent. So when I hear that of just people being like, you're just nostalgic for something, like, no, bitch, I fucking know good movies because I've been doing, this long enough. Not to sound pretentious, but I mean, I kind of am. That I know what fucking nostalgia is. And this movie, Wrong Turn, and I'm sorry for people who do really love this again, but this was my love for this was nostalgia for the longest time, because I haven't revisited this in 10 years or more. Right. Like that's the last time I might have watched it, and there's a reason for that, because I haven't had the desire to go back and watch it, because it is nostalgia. It's like waning nostalgia where I'm just not thinking about it, where if there's movies like the Scream movies that I'm just always thinking about and always wanting to go back and revisit, I can watch those again and again, and they'll only get better. They're not going to get worse over time, because they are good movies. So don't ever fucking use nostalgia as a reason to cut down someone's opinion, because you could just as easily turn the tables around and say like, well, you just have recency bias, and that's why you think that this is so great. So anyway, that was my mini rant and takeaway of Wrong Turn and just nostalgia in general.
Of course. And I think probably the best thing that I personally would take away from your alleged rant is probably best not to diagnose, someone's fandom if you're in any kind of an exchange with them, because you don't know, and it's presumptuous, it's self-righteous, it's what ordinary conversations wouldn't compose of that kind of language. So why would fandom conversations, why would it be okay when we're discussing that? Like, that said, I feel like if you don't like something, say it. And if you do like something, say it. And you should be free enough to say that without fear of being attacked or labeled or dismissed. Or even if you don't have fear, just don't annoy someone with your stupid logic. That's true. That's harder. But I'd say probably just it's best to, if somebody has a different opinion from you, best to abstain from any kind of coming from any kind of higher place, and just inquire, just ask questions, just ask really, why? But keep it playful, keep it cute. There's no reason to put other people down. I mean, there are tons of people who have shared opinions with me as a result of being on this pod, who get into my DMs and, say things that shock me in terms of their rankings or their own, what I may attribute to nostalgia or to inexperience, or I may have my own opinions about it. But the thing is, why do I need to share that with them? Is that going to help them in any way? Are they going to receive that in a way that is actually going to boost them? No, I never responded to any person who had more experience in any field than me, or any more acquisition of years, who was older than me, talking down to me. But I also educated myself, and as a result, I remember I really miss my youth, because now people kind of expect me to know shit. But when I was 20 years ago and younger, I would get in the company of people who were older than me, and they would name names that they expected me not to know, and I would know them, like James Whale or Betty Davis or what have you. And I'd be like, yeah, I know Greta Garbo. Yeah, I know this person and that person, Karloff, Bela Lugosi. And we could talk about their movies, and then they could bring up titles I didn't know about and talk about those. Oh, what about Charles Laughton? I'm like, well, I love him in Hunchback of Notre Dame. What else has he done? And they're like, oh, and then they just like let me know there's a path, that you could take, that you could see more of like what this incredible talent has done. And it's an exchange. It's an actual conversation, and no one is insulted. No one is insulting the other person. And I just wish we could get back to something like that.
Yeah. I think it's just so normal for people to argue in bad faith in this day and age. And it's unfortunate. And I think that, like gatekeeping is obviously a huge problem as well. But, and we actually just talked about this before we started, of just like, there's a reverse of that too. There's almost like this like appropriation of like a fandom that like someone who just like starts to watch something for the first time and then claims ownership of it, as if like there hasn't been people watching it for decades that have already based opinions on it. And the thing is, like, a ranking, and I don't know, I'll fucking say this on every podcast if I have to. A ranking is a ranking. It is not required to be right or wrong.
No.
And once you take your ego out of that and understand that, you can just enjoy that people have different placements of movies, and that these are just movies, and you don't need to get like hostile or belligerent or insulting to people, even if you're just like doing it in a, like, especially if you're doing it in a very passive aggressive way online, because it's just like, I love when people challenge me. I want people to question and ask me like, why that and why this. But the moment someone will like come in there and just be like, well, you're wrong because of this and yada yada yada, that's arguing in bad faith, or just trying to twist someone's words around, or just like, that's all arguing in bad faith. And I just like, why can't we just like, we're all about loving this genre. We should have a natural affinity towards one another based on that shared love. Why can't everyone just get along? I don't know why I have this this mindset together. I just want everyone to be happy.
Right.
But it's not going to happen, so.
Well, it can, we can try to maybe just like with this pod, create like an avenue as best as we can for people who enjoy listening to us. Because, we don't agree all the time.
Yeah.
and we're not even, we have our moments, but I know you've told me in the past that there are people who like, you see in comments like where people discuss like, oh, they're obviously not really friends. Or this is the last podcast they will ever record because there's no way. And it's like, no, we can disagree, and we can, we can even, like cross a boundary or push, nudge each other in a particular direction and know that, because of a context, we've already established a context. We both know, because we've had conversations like this off pod, that we're coming from a place of acceptance, and everything that runs over that is either emotion or camp or or just some fun snark. Like, we can all use a little of that, but it's hard to use snark with people you don't know, and it's especially hard to do it via Twitter or any other kind of like social media platform. Tone is everything, and I just that's why it kind of, to bring it back to this movie, that's why it kind of kills me. I don't take any kind of like pleasure in putting it down or and I'm not trying to dismiss it at all. I'm just here to kind of like reason out why it doesn't work for me. But there are, one of the things I do want to address that did work for me in terms of just like, you talked about set pieces earlier. One set piece that I appreciate, I don't even know if it qualifies as a set piece, but it's a death, it's a kill, was Francine's. Just kind of like, whoever it was, I still don't know who it was who killed her, but the big guy who got behind her and just kind of like hoisted her up with that barbed wire, like, you know, like pulling her mouth and just kind of like squeezing and squeezing and squeezing, and that was the way she died. Oh,
well, no, that wasn't the way she died, because she was still alive when they brought her body back to the shack.
Was she breathing?
Yeah, you could see her breathing. She was looking right at them.
But you know what? I didn't see the breathing, but you know what I did see? And I couldn't tell if it was a mistake in the movie, but you know, I think you're right. But now you're making me remember it.
I know I'm right, honey.
I know, but it wasn't that she it wasn't that she was breathing. It was that, and I felt like that can't be a mistake, and it can't be a prosthetic. It looks too real. There was something, like maybe it was shiny blood, I can't tell, but there was some kind of gore or sweat or all of the above on her neck that she was laying there, and you could see her neck pulse. Like you could see that there was still blood pumping in her, and it didn't feel like it was a mistake. You know, it felt like, oh my God, there's still, she might be brain dead, or she might be, who knows what she is. Maybe her spinal cord has been like jostled around enough that she's no longer sending like receptors from her eyes to her brain for it to be conscious of, but who knows? Maybe she just can't, you know, manifest it physically or something, but she is alive. You're right, actually. So, okay, so her attack, shall we say, I found particularly gruesome. It made me wince, and not a lot of the things in this movie made me wince in terms of like effective gore. Because also, you said also earlier it's not particularly scary. I don't find it scary. I'm not scared to go in the woods after seeing this movie.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's almost like a roller coaster of things that work and things that don't work, because like right before that, she, like, Evan disappears, and she goes off to look for him, and I think that could have been done so much more effectively, because, you know, sometimes and they have it playing with the Scott as well when he gets separated from the group, and it's sort of like that realization when you know, like, I'm alone now, like no one else is here, or you know, so like, you know, you've been talking to someone for so long, and like, where are they now? And I think that instance with Francine could have been done a lot more effectively, where she just kind of wanders off, and then she finds the ear, and it does that like boom boom boom, like zoom in on that, like close, like then we're gonna like, go even closer to this like fake looking ear. So I hated that. I hate that was sort of like his off screen, like not necessarily that the kill was off screen, but they didn't capitalize off of that sensation of her kind of like realization that she was now alone. I think that she played it well, just in terms of like understanding it. Like there weren't like any like bad performances in this movie at all. I mean, the day players at the beginning, but I mean like whatever.
But yeah, like, no, those are Evan's piercings. Like, even like something like that could have I mean, that would have been maybe like a note too high as far as like camp or
Evan,
cheese, but
I've got your ear.
Oh, that's another
Can
thing.
you hear me?
She just starts. She picks up the ear. She starts talking into it.
Where are you? If this was like Scary Movie and it was like Anna Faris, that's what.
Yes. Oh my God. See, that is glorious. But you're making me realize another thing too. The encounter of the cabin, the dark, dank chamber of it all, and they're all walking around. Number one question I want to ask you about this, because the smart one of not the group, but now he's like part of the group by default, I guess, with Chris, Desmond Harrington's character, the lead man person, is walking around, and isn't he the one who keeps going, hello, hello, hello? It is not a big cabin. It is 3 rooms maximum. Yeah. And they're like looking for a bathroom, and he's walking around. How many times, Zach, number one, if you were to walk up to that cabin, well, would you, let's put it that way. You see a cabin like that in the middle of woods, you've been lost and everything like that. You going into that cabin?
Well, okay. I didn't really want to get too much into this, because this is like where you start to nitpick about certain things in the movie, but their reasoning for going into the cabin was so tenuous. Like, it essentially, there was kind of 2 factors. The one was that Carly really had to pee.
Yeah.
And the second one is that they needed to use a phone. Well, first of all, let's address the Carly needing to pee thing.
You're in the woods.
You're in the fucking woods. Like, who... like I know that she's sort of like presented as like, you know, mildly prissy,
right?
But I mean, like if it comes down to like just squatting behind a bush or going into this disgusting hovel where there's like goop and like all this over the toilet, like,
yes,
which I mean, like you're not sitting on that toilet anyway. You're gonna be hovering over it as you do whatever you're gonna do. That why can't you do this in the woods? And like there's a very good counter argument that's brought up of just like like we're in West Virginia, you know, people, you go into someone's house, like they're gonna shoot you, sort of thing. It's just like, I really have to pee, I don't care. So just like that was a fucking like terrible thing in the script. So you know, huge nitpick, but I mean there's that. Then there was like maybe they have a telephone. It's just like, do you see any fucking telephone lines anywhere? Like, or do they have like their cell phone? And it's like this is 2003. It's like the Motorola Razr was not even invented yet. They've got like his thing. He didn't even have a flip phone. It was like one of those like old Sony. Like it's just like the fucking the big. I mean, it's not huge, but it was like
right.
Anyway, that was like this phone that he was using was like what Paris Hilton finds in that box. It's an outdated phone by 2005 standards.
Sure.
But like, are they assuming that these like whoever lives in that house has cell phones? And even then, how are you getting a signal? Because even at the beginning of the movie, he lost his signal. So this their whole fucking rationalization for going into that house was way off. And even once they were in there, just like slowly kind of the realization of just like, we can't be in here. Like she saw that fucking jar with the teeth in it and she's just like, ew. And it wasn't until I think like at that point, this was maybe the only time in the movie or one of the few times where Jessie kind of showed her final girl energy, because they're walking up to it and she's looking around and she's just like, I have a bad feeling about this, like something is not right here. And she's the one that finds the barbed wire, and that was like the clue, just like these are the people who did this to us, sort of thing. But it's like they're playing around with this of like everyone's discovering something all at the same time, and then
a music box here, a tiara there, a doll head.
Yes.
A refrigerator full of bloody mason jars.
And it's just like, again, it's just like, it's doing everything effectively for like how basic it is. But I just, the reason for going into the house, like that was like, at least in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which every sequel, you know, this happens, where they run into a house because their lives are in danger. They need refuge. These people are not hard done by at all. They've been walking for maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes tops. And it's like, I have to pee. We need to, like, here's the first sign of civilization. Let's go into this house. I don't even know why they're walking up road, because who knows how fucking far you're going to be going before you hit you might never hit anything. In a situation like that, even though the gas station or whatever was like the last like place that you know had any human person in it, and even though it didn't have a phone, I would walk back that way, because at least I know that there's a main highway. Maybe it would have taken like 2 hours to walk there or more, whatever. That's where they're gonna get. There's the huge fucking car pile up because of the spill or whatever. There's gonna be people there. You have no idea what's up ahead. So the logic in this movie, I mean, I was trying to not think about it too much, but it really pissed me off. So I would not go in that fucking house. Long story short, I wouldn't even have been going in that direction. But yeah, I would not go anywhere near that, especially, you know, and that's another thing. Sorry, that's another thing. There are hundreds of cars there. There are missing people. This is in the newspaper clippings at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, why is anyone even in this area? Why are people not investigating this area? Why is that? I mean, that now I'm just getting like pedantic, but it's almost like the movie doesn't care about things like that. I'm not concerned about it, but I mean, like, you're asking me if I'm in the movie and rationalizing it. No, I'm not doing any of that shit. I'm not even going anywhere near those woods. So, sorry, just to excuse this overindulgence of nitpicking. I'm only saying that because you've placed me in the movie specifically.
I feel like I shot off a pistol and there was an avalanche.
Yeah, these are not complaints about the movie per se. It's just me.
Okay. But it happened. Well, I will say, you mentioned like the screenplay and the screenwriting and everything like that, and the poor screenwriting of it all. One thing I did appreciate, the angle that I don't feel is usually taken with this trope of like, kind of like finding the dark workhouse or playhouse, if you will, of like, whoever it is that's going to do the damage to you and all that, was the fact that like Jeremy Sisto Scott brought up the apocalyptic visionaries and cults that they also might be in danger of encountering in this, kind of like rustic, middle of nowhere, kind of like thing. And I was like, oh, again, his neuroses kind of like pays off and brings something original, brings something kind of like fresh to a well-worn kind of like tenet of this story. I also appreciated the fact there were things like little things in his performance, like when after the family passes out and everything like that, and the fact that they're all like walking out, and I think Carly is the one who like kicks a can or a bottle or something.
Oh, probably.
And it makes a noise.
Probably
of course.
her. Yeah.
And it makes a noise because she's in front of him, and she kicks it, and he immediately, because he's such a good actor, immediately just kind of like wraps his arms around her. And I don't know if at that point, I don't think he covered her mouth there, but he just wraps his arm around her and just like hugs her very, very tight, because there's no rational thought behind it outside of like, oh, I'm scared, I have to, you're my teddy bear, and we need to be still. We need to be still, because if we are, then they won't hear the noise, kind of, like it's irrational, but I loved it. It felt so incredibly human. Authentic. Yeah. Speaking of human, what isn't for me? Should I bring this up now or should I wait?
No, please. I want to hear it. Yeah.
Well, Carly, her reaction to everything. Like, I understand fight or flight, and some people just panic and they just get stuck there and they locked in it and they become Johnny useless or Johnny fuck up. And I feel like Carly is definitely designated as that person, certainly once Scott is out of the picture. But even just the fact that like when they're talking about like she doesn't want to go because she's scared that I guess they're going to get caught or something, and I don't even remember who she's arguing with, but she's just like, you didn't see what they did to Francine, you didn't see what we saw. And it's like, well, they may not have seen exactly what you saw, but they know what went down. And if because she's like making an argument for being immobilized. And it's like, well, if we stay here, they're going to find us.
I'm also wondering why she watched that. Because, I mean, like, they were in that, like, I don't know if they were in, like, a small closet or they were in, like, the bathroom or whatever. But
they were
she did not have to, like, she did not have to watch the whole fucking... Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's even covering... That's when he was covering her mouth.
Yeah.
Because... Yeah. So
that argument, because that came at, like, before they found the field of cars, because they were running up that hill... and the cannibals took off in the truck, and then she's saying that to him, to Scott, and that's when he's just like, you and I we're gonna survive, we're gonna get out of this, we're gonna get married, and we're never gonna go into the fucking woods again. Right. And so that was sort of like, that was the beginning of her downward spiral for sure. But then after, like, once he got taken out, she became insufferable, because when they got to that branch or whatever, like the tree falling over, and they're like, okay, we have to go by foot.
Right.
Okay, now I'm just thinking like the truck was left stranded there, but then somehow they had it at the end. Okay, whatever.
Right.
I'm not gonna overthink this, but I guess the cannibals backtracked and then backed their truck up all that entire road. But
maybe
they got pretty far away from them once they got into the truck, and they got to that section, and they all get out, and that's where she's just sitting on the log, and she's just like, no, go without me, I'm not doing. And they're just like, bitch, like, get up and fucking move. Like, I think even Eliza says to her, just like, he died so you could live. Like, don't let that, like, death be in vain. And she's like, no, I can't. Like, she reverts into, like, a Candyman Stacy at that point. Yeah. But then she's all over the place, because he almost steps in a bear trap, or like because
Yeah.
it goes flying out of the ground.
Sure.
And they're like, what the fuck? And then you just hear like this maniacal laughter, and it's Carly, and she's just like, ha, 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 ha. And it's just
What
like,
the
where's
fuck?
that coming from? But then like 5 minutes later, like they get up into the little watchtower, and she's all of a sudden just like, guys, I found the radio. And she's all of a sudden like she's back in the mode. But then she's the one that's like gets on there and just like, help us, blah, blah, and just like, shut up. She's like screaming out, is anyone there? And just like, keep it down. Like, why are you fucking us? Like, we should have left you back on that log, like, at this point. But
there's even like, even just like going up to the watchtower, like as a group, like it made me think, like, I understand why one person would want to go up there and why they would want to try to find a radio and why, you know, like maybe even resources, and they did find them, like that, good for them. But at the same time, I thought, do you really think at this point that there is one corner of this damn forest that these whatever you want to call them, that this family have not already covered, and that they don't already kind of have staked out and everything like that? Like, I mean, the fact that all three of them were going up there, like they were going to stay up there, I thought that was incredibly stupid. And then
the little glow sticks too. It's just like, hey, stay away from the windows. We don't want them to see us, but let's light these fucking glow sticks to illuminate
again, Jurassic Park.
To illuminate this fucking house in the sky. That you think they're not going to see that? Like some of the, I mean, it made for a great set piece of just like, you know, setting it on fire and them having to jump into the things.
I remember that.
Yeah, like that was fun, but it's almost like, I guess like did the means justify the ends in a way?
Really.
Yeah,
kind of, but no, because some of them survived, but not all of them. So it's up to you. Like, did we really want Carly to survive?
Yeah. I mean, I will say that I liked her death. I think that was probably like, you know, the most effective in the movie, because it was predictable, but it was like, finally, you know, like
this silhouette just kind of rises up behind her, and it's like all this time they've spent up in the tree, and you can again, the movie can be very selective with its hearing, like or its sight, like you can see certain things, you can hear, you can smell the burning, or you can see the smoke, and then you can see the light, and you can see that they're burning you and everything, so you know you got to jump to a tree, but then you can't see that one of them has been climbing the tree this entire time, closing in on you, and then getting right behind you. And it was one of the big laborious ones. I don't remember.
It was Three Finger.
Or was it was Three Finger? Okay, so
and that's why I remember it, because that was like the defining moment for him. So I mean, I liked that moment. I'm not in full agreement with you there.
I wonder, is he that stealthy though? Does he have that kind of restraint? I don't know. But okay,
well, they wrote it, so he did. So I mean,
right. But also the fact that like you talked about like the final girl energy you were getting from Jessie at a certain point in the movie. I seriously, because she spent so much time talking Carly down after Scott's death, I didn't really get some specific, like she was obviously the more stable of the two people of that friend group who were still alive, but she really started manifesting, I guess, what I would be comfortable labeling final girl energy, when after everything that Chris has been like doing, like he's like dressing his own wounds and like crawling up the ladder first to go up there. I'm like, why isn't anybody saying like, no, dude, you take it easy. You could be, you start working too hard, you're going to be pumping more blood, and then you have blood loss, and then we got a whole other thing. Like, take it easy. I'll take care of this. But no, they didn't do that. So finally, she kind of moves into a position when he asks her to hold the branch to knock one of the family members down and everything. She's like, no, you can't move as quick as I can. So she goes off without even asking permission. And he's like, no. And she's still doing it anyway. And I'm like, okay, cool. Now you're taking the reins. Now you're doing something because you want to. And also, I don't think you're stupid for doing it. And it did pay off. So good for you.
Yeah.
That was a good
moment. But it's just like
for her.
Few and far between moments for her. And
yeah.
I mean, we may as well like get into the finale of it all, and then we'll just move on. Because the first time I saw this movie, I was just like, wait, so she dead? Did they like, because they just like grabbed her and like, you know, disappeared. It's just like, oh, that's it. Like, you know, they like built up this like character and I guess like somewhat of a connection with them, because like I think right before that she had her whole spiel about like these were like the best friends a girl can have, like, you know, you find out that you've been like dumped over the answering machine, and then which is like technology from 2003, and that your friends
it's like getting a voicemail today. Yeah
your friends are gonna blow off work and take you camping. Those were the kinds of friends they were, sort of thing. And he's just sort of like,
that was cool. Nothing from him.
And then
it's not
literally
your fault.
the next morning, and it's just like, well, no, this is, because I mean, like, it's a final couple movie technically, but I mean, at that point I was just like, oh, she's as good as dead. Like, she just disappeared from the story. Like, we're now with him, and he's like the most, again, like, charismatic, like, just like unemotive. Like, he's got skills though. He's a fucking, oh my god, what is it? A Gary Stu. Remember we talked about this
a Mary Sue, but a Gary Stu.
Yeah,
he totally is.
We have to, because remember we said, because we were called out for using a term that was offensive, and I'm just like, no, I don't think so. I think that we can use it, but we have to make sure that it applies to everyone that it can. So if there is going to be a guy, he's going to be, it's either a Marty Stew or a Gary Stew, I think.
I like Gary Stew.
Gary Stew,
because I knew exactly what you were saying when you said it.
he's a Gary Stew, because there's literally, like, he's been written to be a doctor or med student, so, you know, he's capable of handling the situation, but he has absolutely like everyone likes him. Like, they all kind of are like, I mean, like, it's the two that stay behind, like, talk shit about him. But I mean, like Scott and Carly are immediately like, oh, are you okay? Like, this guy's cool. She's a little, like, hesitant of him, which I think makes her more interesting. But, you know, she eventually comes around. But yeah, he's 100% a Gary Stew. I'm so uninterested in his like...
It was laughable that he basically Cape Feared back to the cabin by getting, like, underneath that vehicle and
lifting himself up.
And then, okay, that was the other thing. Yeah, just like hoisting himself up by his own petard. Like, there's rocks, and there's, like, I mean, he should have been a lot more bloody when he finally reached, like, that destination. But then, I mean, maybe this was all happening in the background, and, like, we did, you know, and we couldn't see it, like, it wasn't on camera. But, like, I was so, like, when he finally drove that vehicle through the front, like the facade of the cabin and everything like that, all I thought was, did you know where she was? Like, did you know you weren't gonna hit her, or that she was still alive, so it would make all of this, like, worthy? Like, if we would have seen him, like, looking through the screen door or something.
Yeah, he heard her screaming, but he didn't know where she was.
In the cabin she was.
Here's the thing, because I must have, like, misremembered something, or I was thinking of a different movie, because when the deputy or the park ranger, whoever, gets killed, which I thought was a funny moment. I actually liked that part, even though it's just like kind of a throwaway. Yeah.
It's a misery moment.
He falls. Misery, that's a good one. Because he falls down, and I think that the camera made sure to, like, focus on, like, he had the gun in the holster, and I was like, oh, they're showing this to us because Chris is going to take it, and the next time we see the body, the gun's not going to be there. And I was waiting for that, and it just didn't happen. So I'm just like, okay, wrong movie that I'm remembering this from. But it's like, you have a weapon, that didn't come into play. Because even, like, when he has the shotgun, he's like, I only have one shot left. So it's just like, there could have been a lot more calculating on the writer's part and the directors that, you know, went into making this, because at that point it just felt like, all right, well, what do we do with every other horror movie? We got to wrap it up. And that's why, like, so many horror movies are, you know, start off competently enough and then get to the end and it's just kind of like a throwaway. I'll actually say, like, this movie did a good job just because it's paced so well that, like, the second act and all that, like, it kept me interested. It kept me entertained. So it's really just, like, this last section of the movie. But, like, everything with her, because it's like, you know, she had to be rescued. And, you know, she had her one arm, like, because they had to give her something to do.
Jesus. I can't stand the fact that, like, she's alive basically because the movie needs her to be alive. Then that's all. Like, I mean, I don't want to see her die, but at the same time, it's like, can we put it in some kind of context where, like, why did they kidnap her? Why did they save her? I can think of plenty unsavory reasons why they might have kept her, but the thing is, the movie immediately doesn't even allow me to go there thinking like, oh, they might have kept her because, you know, one of the guys fancies her or something like that. Maybe
well,
they
it seemed
all
like
do, who
Sawtooth
knows?
did, because he was the one that was like sort of like caressing her.
It seemed like he did, but he also took the knife and he was like getting ready to cut her throat. So I'm like, well then, if you're just gonna kill her, why are you wasting your time? Is it because she's so pretty? And you're not Leatherface, so you're not like wasting time like going, oh, such pretty hair, I want her hair. Oh, what a pretty face, I want this face. You know, like all of that stuff is in like this movie's predecessor, but it's not. I just
think
wish
that
it weren't so sloppy.
Yeah, because I mean, we already talked about how like we wanted Scott to be the lead here, but I mean, I think at that point, the more like the better decision would have been for Chris to get. I mean, if they had to kidnap someone, for him to get kidnapped, and for her, because she kind of like found her character agency in the moment that you talked about, where she was like, I'm gonna lure them, you do the branch thing, and then she gives us the line about like, you know, her friends and why she came here, where it's just like she's coming into her power. And then they take it away from her. Whereas like him, he's been shot, he's injured. You know, I don't know any reason why they would need him to, or like keep him alive if they were to take him back to the cabin.
Sexism.
But I mean, they could have even killed him at that point, and then she could have just been like,
Revenge.
oh, I'm gonna fuck these guys up.
So they can't kill anyone else. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, like that would have been, even if they took him and she just went back to save him, that would have been so much more interesting. Because I mean, I don't think that like Jessie is the most interesting character in the movie. She was the most interesting character still alive at that point.
Yes,
so
I agree.
it was just like it was bad decision after bad decision to like kind of cater to this story of Chris Flynn. Which is his name, because I remember he told her, and she's like, well, Chris Flynn, you're our mule or whatever, and she threw it. She had some like good little faith moments, but I love the one where, because when he says like, I gotta be in Raleigh by 7, he's like, well, better get a move on it.
Yeah, right. More stuff like that, again, pushed to the forefront.
And there was another one more is like when he's like, hello, when they're at the waterfall, he's like, hello, and she's just like points at the dead end sign, just like, hate to state the obvious. So I mean, there was an attempt, and I feel like all of that was probably Eliza. She is probably like, this character is not interesting, and like I need to fucking do something to just like to zhuzh up the script and make her at least somewhat likable or more adventurous, to at least maybe like justify what she does later on. Sure.
Also, just kind of I mean, it's not new in horror movies at this particular point. When the movie was released or anything like that, but I remember even feeling exhausted by it, because there's a way to invigorate your audience when the killer somehow comes back, as it were. You know, like you think he's down, but no, he's not, because you watch horror movies, you know he's coming back. But it felt like they brought, anytime Sawtooth or Three Finger was like kind of taken out, as it were, they stayed alive due to basically the superpowers of inbreeding, as established in the opening credits. Of like, they had some kind of like psycho strength or something like that. It was one of the headlines, and I was like, okay, I've heard of that, you know, legend as well, that like people who have some kind of mental incapacity or some kind of like, you know, handicap might have like a real gift of physical exertion, or I guess not exertion, but maybe for physical strength or physical ability, you know, to handle things that maybe people who have a different kind of wiring in their brain don't have. The movie, by that point, I was just kind of like, okay, they're back because we need another beat. And even then, like Eliza Dushku, Jessie, I felt she had that axe. And she finally axed Three Finger. once, and I felt like she exercised some serious restraint. Maybe it's because I'm used to seeing Faith just go ballistic, but I really wouldn't have blamed Jessie if she would have hacked into him at least 2 or 3 more times just to make sure.
Yeah.
You know, like, again, final girl energy. Make damn sure. Go for the head. All that shit, you know? Like, I want something like that, and she just wasn't smart enough because apparently he survived. So, yeah. Whatever.
And not only that, but it's just because it's just like she basically had to follow Chris's lead at that point. Or just like, what, you know. She helped though. She assisted. She basically did the thing in like Halloween Resurrection where just like, I'm going to jump on his back. You know, and you put the wire around his neck, sort of thing.
No, and we're past that. Even in 2003, we are past that point. And I remember that was another thing that gave me fatigue. I remember thinking like a lot of the tropes that were brought forth that we can delight in with movies that were made in earlier eras, or if you know, even if they were made in later eras, but like given, I don't know, some kind of breath of fresh air, like some kind of renewed take. You know, I can enjoy them, but I there were too many moments where it just kind of had me slumping in my chair in that initial screening, and I think that's why I default back to it. And like you said earlier, I don't return to this film often, and as I was sitting through it, there were enough pluses happening for me that I was just kind of like, well, why? Like, I love this Jeremy Sisto thing that I'm going on. This, you know, they seem capable enough. There's a lot of tropes that aren't new, that don't necessarily annoy me. They're not the worst execution of these tropes, but they're also not the best. Like, why haven't I seen this movie more often than not? And the simple answer came by the end of it. It was like, well, I'm tired. I don't, you know.
And it's been done better.
Yeah. There's other, if there were more joy in it, or even more grime, or more, I don't know what the answer really is to making it better. I just feel like we've gotten a little bit closer to pinpointing what it does lack for me, and that's helpful. I'll sleep a little bit more peaceful tonight. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you have gotten through all of the negativity to this point, I mean, I'll close out this section of the episode to just say that I'm glad that I watched it. I had a good time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'll watch this movie again, but I'm especially glad that we're sitting here and talking about this, because I mean, like it or lump it, I've had fun discussing Wrong Turn with you and like all of its positives and negatives, and and you know, that's what film criticism is. So
it's what it's all about, baby.
Any last thoughts that are not character based for the cherry picker?
Probably not.
All right.
Oh, I did appreciate the cars from different eras. That was kind of like a kind of refreshing spin. I was like, oh, not just abandoned cars, but like there seems to be like an old Model T. There seems to be, you know, like, okay, so they've been doing this a long time. All right, appreciated that. There you go, a positive.
Some attention to detail is good.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Well, let us get to the cherry picker.
It's not like we kill people on purpose.
Okay, first order of business, we need to choose a cherry on top. I think this is another clean sweep. I don't know. Yeah. It's going to be Scott, whose last name is Corby, Korbee, for inquiring minds.
What?
Yeah.
All right.
That's what Google says. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. Shoulda, coulda, woulda been a better Alice, we'll say, to Chris's Annie.
Yeah. Oh my God. What if Wrong Turn had been the Jeremy Sisto franchise? Wow. Final boy.
Yeah.
He'd be a good final boy.
Yeah, I agree. Anyway, last week we asked you who deserves to die the most in... What did we do last week? Because I did not update the movie or the names, but I have the numbers. It was...
Prom Night. It was Prom Night.
Prom Night. Okay, yes, Prom Night. I nominated, and I actually remember their names now, the full names. Okay. I nominated Drew Shinnick, and you nominated Lou Farmer.
Very good.
Across Patreon, Instagram, and YouTube. The final tally came to 154 for Drew versus 511 for Lou.
Yay! Thanks, guys.
I am like so shocked by that because here's the thing, like the Patreon and the Instagram votes were pretty much on par. Like the Patreon one, there was more people voted for Drew, and the Instagram one there was more for Lou, but they were like evenly matched. I mean, it might have been like 55% to 45%, but on YouTube it was like 19%. Versus whatever the takeaway from 81, I don't know.
Wow.
81%. And I think
newbies.
it all comes down to the photos that we use. I might just stop putting photos because they look at Lou and it's just like his unibrow. It's just like, oh well, this guy does not know how to trim his brow hair. Death
his
to
bad
him.
Teeth, his grimace. Yeah.
But
but it helps as identifiers because otherwise people are just gonna see the names and be like, who? So
I still think that Drew by a long shot is just by virtue of him not dying, shoulda, woulda, coulda again.
Okay. Well, what did the people say?
Amethyst Frost says, after I watched this, I could only describe it as the I Know What You Did Last Summer to Halloween Scream. So I'm glad you guys also made the comparison between I Know and Prom Night. Both had an outrageous opening premise, a bland final couple, and amazing soundtracks. And then they asked, do I have this one on vinyl? And no, I do not. But I'll vote for Drew because he sucked but survived, whereas Lou sucked a little more but did die memorably. I wish Nick was an option too, as I got the same vibes from his character as Ray in I Know What You Did Last Summer, in that he was just as culpable as the other three, but was barely on the killer's radar until the very end, and the movie didn't examine his feelings about the murder, especially when he was dating the sister of the victim, at all. A total waste of a character.
Hear, hear.
Silent Saturn. I guess my comment why I voted for Drew got deleted. Possible. It wasn't me or Eddie. We don't. Well, I accessed the account, but yeah, I haven't deleted anything. So sometimes YouTube might do that. But I'm sorry that happened. But I have your new comment. So I will instead point out that Randy was right to advise to watch Prom Night. The brother's the killer. So it's like Randy in that case, Randy almost predicted. Well, not, I mean, in a roundabout way, predicted the events of Scream 3 way before they happened. Yeah, it's like you should have been watching Prom Night, Randy.
Completely different motivations though from the brothers, but whatever.
Movie Maniac 03. This was a first time watch, but I vote for Lou mainly because he was just really douchey and I couldn't stand it when he was on screen.
Same.
I don't know if we mentioned this, but now just because Silent Saturn brought it up, that's now 2 franchises for horror, or I guess they're franchises, for Jamie Lee Curtis's, like, for the villain to be her brother.
Yeah, totally.
Did we mention that? I don't remember.
I think we did. Yeah. It occurred to me while I was watching the movie. I know for damn sure. Yeah.
Sean P. Is it sad that I remember the remake more than the original? Not because it was better, but due to the fact that the remake was so terrible that at least left an impression, while the original left zero impact on me. I'll always love Randy's acknowledgement of it in Scream, though. Once again, I have to choose the one with the most votes because I don't actually have an opinion. At least you're honest about it. I'm starting to doubt my credibility with these.
Just watch the movie.
Grant Dempsey. Lou and Drew, hey, rhyme, are pretty much the same kind of asshole. I'll give it to Drew because at least Lou does die, and they both should. To be honest, though, I'd be happy voting for just about anyone in this movie. They can all go, including Kim, the ultimate final girl by default, not even a target, and if I remember right, doesn't even know that anything's going on at all until the last few minutes of the movie. That's very true. The only one I'd care to
think about that.
The only one I'd care to save would be Wendy for showing some decent final girl potential in that chase scene.
Oh, all right.
And then Hamish says, hard choice because they are both not very nice people. So I flipped a coin and ended up with Lou. P.S. I didn't get a prom either, Zach. You're not alone.
See, no one's saying they're motivated by the photo. People are just kind of going,
okay, well,
Lou.
these are just the people who commented.
Well, this is the evidence. Keep going.
That's it.
That's it?
not
Oh, okay.
evidence. Sometimes there's a vocal minority. You're going to say that 566 people who voted in this flipped a coin, and that's how it came to.
I'm saying it's possible. But anyway, okay. So this one, it's probably not going to stun anyone. What my my choice is.
Your choices rarely ever do, but go on.
Okay, bitter Betty. No, I'm going to choose Carly just because all of the intolerable shit that we've brought up until this point, and just the insistence, she tried to take control when they were, looking for Scott, like the manic, just like, we gotta find Scott, we have to find Scott. And then she's the reason, I still argue that she's the reason the family knew which direction in the woods to look, because they didn't seem... He seemed to see exactly where the car was. They would have been fine if they would have just driven a little bit slower and just scanned the forest, and then he could have run up and been like, guys, and just jumped into the back of the pickup, and they would have been fine. But no. So I don't like that. I also just, okay. When they're all like up in the fucking watchtower, didn't bring this up, but the fact that like she's there, and she's like thinking, fuck it, I'm just going to kill myself. She's like, let go of me, let go. I'd rather jump than burn to death. At that particular point, I realized because of like the register, the place in her vocal placement that she was resonating at that particular moment, I immediately wrote down a note and I just said, I owe Scout Taylor Compton a huge apology because I feel like...
I want my fucking prescription!
You bitch, give me my prescription! Because I will say, though we haven't covered that movie on this pod, but we have discussed it in the past,
Yeah.
and you and I, we've gotten a lot of mileage out of making fun of her, and I feel like, you know what, at this point, at least I enjoy it enough to make fun of it. Like that is now a reference, like that is a different kind of honor, like, but it's memorable and I have fun with it. And I will, the next time I watch Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, I will look forward to that coming. I think I have every subsequent viewing from my first one. I've been like, oh, it's coming. I'm going to get to hear her.
I will also like our making fun, as it were, of Scout Taylor Compton is like, it's out of love.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Yeah.
So there you go. But I don't... this is the last time I think you're ever going to hear me imitate fucking Carly. And it's not the actress's fault. She's written so poorly. And yeah. But I mean, in a different... If it were handled differently, I could have fun with this character and just be like, kill her. But I'm just like, oh, God, just kill her. So she deserves to die the most.
Put her out of her misery.
Yeah, right?
Get her out of the movie. She's bad for business. All right.
Okay,
I'm
what about you, Zach?
gonna go with what was my original choice of old man or gas station attendant, because I mean, who the fuck is this guy? First of all, he's sitting there chugging Pepto-Bismol. Did you notice that?
No, I did not.
He was chugging Pepto-Bismol like it was a milkshake. And he clearly has full awareness of who these cannibals are, what's going on there, that he's like willingly, like he doesn't seem to be in cahoots with them either, because like when the truck came up, he thought it was them and he went to hide at the end. But it's almost, it's like the omission of like sin, of just like, I'm not even going to tell you that like going there is going to be bad. He even says, because Chris is like,
if you say
take care.
So,
he's
whatever.
like, take care. And he's like, you're the one that's going to need to take care. You know, and he says that under his breath after Chris has left. And it's just like, what's that? And he's just like, nothing. You know, he may as well like, because he essentially is like the crazy Ralph character archetype of this movie. But it makes me, I mean, I love Crazy Ralph. Like, we love Crazy Ralph on the Cherry Picker. But, like, it makes me appreciate Ralph so much more because, like, he's, as much as he's, like, crazy or perceived that way, and people are just like, oh, I'm not going to listen to him. He's, like, you know, the one that's, like, crying wolf. He's at least trying. I mean, he's having fun with it, and he's obviously like poking the bear, and he's going.
Of God.
He's going down there, and he's like trying to scare them and shit. But I mean, at least he's giving them the option to exercise. Yeah. Whereas this guy's just like, and he's getting snarky with it because he comes up and he's just like, and you know, not that I care if like people are fucking with Chris Flynn, but he's just like, do you have a phone? Sends him over to the payphone, knowing that it doesn't work, only for him to go there. I mean, this guy's got to be in Raleigh by 7, and you're wasting his fucking time. And then he comes up, he's like, do you have a phone inside? And he's like, there's my only phone. Or whatever. So anyway, long story short, fuck that guy. How many people he probably sent to their deaths because he just couldn't be bothered to tell anyone because he's just happy sitting there drinking Pepto-Bismol. Like,
I will say though, if our Gary Stu, Chris, had any kind of insight or ability to recognize nuance or anything like that, you know, like some. Like a kind of, you know, like a passive aggressiveness or anything like that, he might have been like, why is that guy like so okay with me going off into the woods and taking this route? But no, he was too self-important. But that's my
I feel like there should be a dishonorable mention for Chris because I mean I could have nominated him, but you bring up a really good point. Like, he's so non-confrontational. Like the very beginning when he goes up to that truck driver. Yeah. And because even then he's just sort of like, I mean, I guess the trucker does ask him like, why do you need to do this? And he's like, oh, I got to be in Raleigh for a job interview. And he's like, well, here's what you got to do. You're going to go back in your car and fix your hair a couple more times. And he's just like, thank you, sir. And like takes off. He's just like, I'm not even going to entertain this or anything. I'm just going to like leave. And
what? Was it just me, or did it seem before the trucker like basically told him off? Like the trucker really, really wanted to fuck him.
I mean, wouldn't you?
He was just sitting there, and he was just kind of like almost leaning on the car door, looking at Chris, just kind of like, "Oh, really?"
Well, I mean, if he finished if he finished that thought, he might have been like, "Go fix your hair a little, make yourself look presentable,
pretty,
and then come back over here, and we'll figure out."
And I'll show you a good time. Yeah. I'll show you what West Virginia is really.
I'll take you to Raleigh by 7.
I'll take you to Raleigh.
All right.
Oh my God. Oh,
anyway,
that truck driver deserves an honorable mention as like the cherry on top. Also.
Jesus. So anyway,
sorry. Yeah.
Those are your options. You have Carly. Oh, I should look up her last name here. You have I Care. Or just like the Dewey and Scream 5, like, I do,
right.
You know?
Yeah, right. Oh, God. And the elevator doors close on top.
Carly Newman, but it's not spelled like Newman, like Alfred E. Newman, or like Hello Newman. It's
of course not.
It's Carly Numan.
N-U-M?
A-N.
Who does that? That's another reason she did not know. I don't know.
Watch, there's
weird
like
ass names.
Someone is listening to this right now. Their last name is Newman, spelled Numan, and they're like,
they're gonna vote.
How dare you?
I know they're gonna vote for you just out of like spite now.
with me,
for your
but
choice.
yeah.
Well, with you, yes, not.
So anyway, you got your choices are Carly Newman and old man. So you can vote your heart, vote your conscience, and the polls are open on Patreon. I want to welcome brand new Patreon supporter, Sean Flanagan. So thank you very much for coming aboard. And as a Patreon supporter, you will get early access to all of these episodes, the weekends or before the weekends of the Tuesday that we release them. We also, I'll get to that in a second because I'm getting off track. You can also vote on Instagram, so follow us there at the Cherry Picker Pod. And you can also vote in the YouTube community section, which seems to be where all of the votes are decided. So that is at the Cherry Picker. Subscribe to us there. If you're brand new to the Cherry Picker and you're listening to us, YouTube, obviously, but if you are watching us on YouTube, you can listen to us on all major podcast, streaming platforms. The RSS feed link is in the descriptions down below. And back to Patreon. If you are also supporting on Patreon under the Freddy Krueger tier, you will get access to the Cherry Picker After Dark, which is the bonus episode we record once every month. This month, which is just ending, May, we did Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 5. You know, speaking of Eliza Dushku, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Although I don't think she's in that season, but you know, maybe if you like Buffy. But this month, coming up for June, we are doing. Do you remember? I'm not going to ask you because you're going to make it difficult. It's Cruel Intentions, which, not horror, but, I mean, it's got all of our favorite people in it. So, Sarah Michelle Gellar, namely.
It's based on a book that was a psychological terror, so there's that.
I mean,
Dangerous Liaisons. The book is a psychological terror. Well,
those siblings are psychological terrors. We're gonna talk about that. We'll talk about that. So if you wanna hear us or watch us discuss Cruel Intentions, make sure to get on Patreon, and it's really great. It helps make the podcast better. So we appreciate all the support you offer us. I also want to thank Andre Felix, who is our podcast editor. All the great work that he does for us, and he's actually going to be coming back. In June, he was with us for the Scream 6 podcast. So look forward to seeing him again. Social media, where can I find you, Edward?
You can find me on Instagram, Letterboxd, and YouTube. Edward is truth. One word, traditional spelling. And how about you, Zack Cherry?
Edward is Troot. You can find me on YouTube, my main channel, Zack Cherry, ZackCherry. Instagram at Retro Bitchface, all one word. Twitter at ZackCherry8. I'm on Letterboxd, or is it Letterboxd, as well.
Letterboxd. Yes.
Letterboxd.
Boxed.
Zack Cherry. You can go look at my my review for Wrong Turn. It's literally it's a sentence.
Those are the best.
We discussed it more thoroughly here. But that's where you can find us. And I will ask you now, Edward, what do we have going on next week?
Okay, is it the one where the guy goes back and everything's waiting for him? And then the bodies, and they don't know. And then we don't, I don't want to give away the ending, but is it that one?
Yeah.
It's the Psycho 2. Not the Psycho 2. That's another movie, but I haven't seen that movie.
Psycho 2.
Roman numeral 2.
Yeah. What do they say? What does Kirby say about it in Scream 6?
Underrated. Kirby
and Mindy, they're just like Psycho 2 is underrated.
Underrated.
Yeah. So there we go. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.